Welcome back to the channel. This is your boy Rich Latta here, back with episode 3 of reacting to your wrestling hot takes. And brother, let's get to it right off the rip. First, appreciate all you guys every week showing up for this video. This feels like it's going to be a staple of the channel, a chance for you guys to holla at me and me talk directly back to you. Before, we go in the direction of eventually doing lives on the channel. After we get to 1,000, we'll see about going live and all that and see who wants to kick it, watch alongs, all of that. Check out all the new hotness on the channel. There's going to be plenty of stuff for you to dig into, word documentaries, essays, video essays, that's what I mean. Different Q&As, or whatever, my mind kind of thinks of, as far as, what's going on in the world of pro wrestling. So, let's get to it. Off the rip, my man Hangman Page, I've got it over here and you guys will be able to see it when, we edit it all together. He says, the direction of Jon Moxley in the Death Riders feels aimless, and him beating Takeshita really cemented that feeling. Absolutely. 100%. The Death Riders at the end of last year were in a radically different direction than Jon Moxley. They were the evil people they've always been. Jon Moxley went through this seemingly born-again metamorphosis in him losing the championship, getting whooped, and quitting in a lot of these matches. Don't forget, he lost that match against Kyle O'Reilly. And then you would think, well, how's this going to affect the group? And he would continue to gaslight them. They would air this stuff on their television. This wasn't stuff that was, for the internet only. This was stuff that, maybe they would say, it's the fans' fault for talking himself into this, but they definitely led people to the water. And then he just valiantly goes through the C2, beats Kyle Fletcher in a classic match, and then Kazuchika Okada, and then all of a sudden he's a babyface, and now he's a babyface and the rest of the group are heels. It is very confusing. And then from there, that same night, MJF wins the World Championship. Now, my feeling on title belts a lot of the time is you put them on people, and this is, a theory of mine. You use these things to keep people separate, to make secret divisions. If you got a championship, you don't necessarily have to go after the other one. Very rare that happens. And in Moxley's case, it would be very convenient that he would have no eyes for the world championship anymore after losing to Hangman Page and then presumably being heel, being babyface, and we got a new heel champion, but you take another championship? I don't know. It seems kind of weird to me. But nevertheless, when he beat Takeshita at this point, I think the booking of Konosuke Takeshita has gone criminally wrong at this point. I think they've made him look like a geek. I think they have made it to where people believe in him so much, and then at the end of the Continental Classic, he loses to Okada in a match that was anticipated for at least 2 years in this company, and then for it to play out for them in a semifinal match that they seemingly don't go all the way hard in, because, why would you? It's not for the C2 championship. And then they put Okada over him, via cheating. And that seemed like such a letdown, I think, and took a lot of air out of Konosuke Takeshita's win sales. And then he loses to Jon Moxley and shakes his hand after. And then he's continually getting just destroyed by Okada and the Don Callis family and made to look like this loser and this geek. This guy had so many people believing in him almost from the second he started working regular matches on American television back in 2021. The fact that it's 2026 now, and we are not talking about this guy is no doubt going to be the first Japanese man to hold the AEW World Championship, or we're not talking about him now as one of the very top stars. This is the guy that won the most outstanding wrestler in the Observer last year. For my money, on any given day, he's the best wrestler in the world. depending on who has a match last. He can definitely approach that conversation. Now, Takeshita, I don't know what they're doing with him. And when I saw that loss at Revolution, I was like, wow, he's killed off and buried. And unfortunately, it feels like they're just trying to stretch this all the way out to All In. And perhaps Moxley got caught up in the Takeshita stuff, but I see no reason that Moxley could not drop the championship to Takeshita, enhance Takeshita's storyline, and at the same time do a much cleaner storyline with Will Ospreay free of the championship. Perhaps they know more things than I do. So, up next, Peter Edge. He said, fans who make it a point to cheer heels only had something really bad happen to them when they were a child. That is an incredible theory, one that made me laugh out loud the second that I read it. And if you are somebody that only cheers the heels, and we've all had our phases where we've done this, right? I would recommend eventually you go to a show and you just cheer like hell for the baby faces. My friends and I started doing this when we used to attend different local indie shows in, our home area. We would attend some of the NXT house shows, and we would just say, yo, we're going to cheer for the baby faces and try to make it almost enhance everything we're watching rather than take away. Now, I'm not saying if a company's giving you a terrible baby face, you need to cheer them if you're in the audience. No, I'm not saying that at all. React to the company how you're going to react to them if, out of a natural feeling. But if you're going in there just saying, yeah, I'm just rooting for all the bad guys, forget all these good guys, like you're kind of undercutting so much. And by that time, you will probably be doing a disservice to the people around you who will begin looking at you. And what don't you want to be? That guy. So, my man Rambo and Slam Pig, shout out to him. He said he has 2. Most wrestling storylines succeed in spite of the booker, not because of them. It's the creativity of the wrestlers that mostly make them work or fail. We'll start right there. I'm going to agree. I take a pro wrestler stance on all this. At the end of the day, whatever storyline it is, it needs to get in the ring at some point. And the people that are in the ring are not the booker, most of the time. I think the bookers can enhance things. They can definitely make bad decisions. But yes, I'm with you. At the end of the day, the wrestlers are going to either take bad material, make it good. They're not going to take a genius storyline and just under-deliver on it. It just, for me, comes down to, I guess, what I value, watching as a fan. Cool. Shout out to whatever Booker man is doing their thing. But at the end of the day, I'm here for the wrestling. So he says, when people talk about stories in wrestling, they are mostly talking about characters having satisfying arcs with consistent and believable motivation, not involve narratives like a movie or a book. The talk about stories is just a way to devalue the in-ring storytelling and characterization by people who watch a product that is terrible at both. Okay. It sounds like Rambones is aiming at the WWE only fans. I will say I'm going to take it out of viewing it through the lens of a company. We can take it how different media talks about stories versus matches and stuff like that. Like I said in my last answer, at the end of the day, the game is about a match. There's a phrase in basketball. It's like, I like to say, the game is about a bucket. Can you put the ball in the basket? And at the end of the day, the match is putting the ball in the basket. If you want to watch stories, Sheamus had a great tweet once, then go, watch a movie. Go watch, a play, an opera or something like that. Stories enhance wrestling, but at the end of the day, it matters if the booker believes in you, if you're a wrestler. It matters what match they eventually put in the ring. That's flat out. Anything else is a grift. Heavenly Halbert. Shout out to him. 2000s All Japan is criminally underrated. Look, it's not the 90s or even 80s All Japan, but if you can dig your way through Muto's wacky sports entertainment-esque ideas, which are honestly very tame in hindsight compared to where even wrestling in Japan has gone. Some of the baffling talent that was bought in and pushed. There's tons of hidden gems there, including a lot of borderline to actual 5-star matches in Toshiaki Kawada, in his opinion, the best of the 4 pillars. I'm a Kobashi guy myself, but that's neither here or there. His incredible Triple Crown reign from 2003 to 2005 that was overshadowed by Kenta Kobashi's legendary GHC title reign. There's a lot of fascinating matches with random names. Ever one to watch Chris Sabin versus Katsuhiko Nakajima or D'Lo Brown versus Toshiaki Kawada? I will watch a D'Lo Brown and Kawada match. You drop me a link and I'll check it out. All Japan in the 2000s is something that has completely kind of not made its way to me. If any All Japan that I've ever watched, it's been in the 90s, obviously with the 4 pillars there. I know I did read a book one time about the exodus of all the wrestlers in All Japan, like the end of Baba's life, Motoko Baba taking over, and the chaos that was there, how they rebuilt basically with a bunch of freelancers, and it was just this Wild West promotion in the very early 2000s, and they kept it going through, different imports. Like you mentioned, Muto basically saw just a wide open field where he could do his thing, and with the collapse of, New Japan in the early 2000s, everything with Inoki losing his mind, there were a bunch of guys that definitely went over there, and they went over to Noah and made their home there. It's just stuff that I've read more stories about it rather than watch the matches in real time or even in retrospect. So you send me that link for that D'Lo Kawada match, though. They brought Tenryu back as well. My man Ten mentions. Chris Gannon, he says, got another one for you. No future AEW World Champion, men's or women's, should have held the WWE title before the AEW one. That is a scorching hot one that I'm going to disagree with. At the end of the day, I know seeing wrestlers, if you're an AEW fan, rise through that are brand new, that are fresh, it's just going to feel better, right? But a hard and stop rule to have that cuts off your booking options. It makes it limited. And I'll just use an example. So like Mercedes Moné can't win the world title. No, can't have that. We'll keep going. Appreciate the comment though, Chris. From my man 10410, MJF thinks he's a lore fiend like Hangman Page or Tam Nakano, but he's not on that level. So I'll say this for MJF, he does have these legitimate stories with all the people that he pretty much mentions. It's not like he's pulling this stuff from his imagination. I think the issue that he might run into, especially with fans, is the medium that it is dumped on, because he comes out on TV with a new person seemingly, and it's always, I was driving you around, I was doing this when I was 17 years old for you, I was doing this when I was 19 years old for you, and all this stuff, and we have all this history that nobody has been alerted to at all, so it all just comes out at once. I think this is probably a weakness of AEW, to where there should have been an MJF documentary already produced, like about his life, essentially. Like, this is where I grew up, this is where I did all this, and packaged and sold to people. Like, drop your 2-hour documentary with your 10 must-see matches from MJF, and then like there's a interview with all the people on there, be like, yo, have those people basically establish this stuff, and then you create your ecosystem to where, hey, buy MJF's new documentary where we're stripping everything back, and you see people, like, imagine if you had the Hurt Syndicate just pop up out of nowhere, and then you have MVP saying, hey, I remember, this kid was doing this, and this, and then that's already footage you can just kind of work into your programming, so when MJF references it, it almost isn't coming directly from him. Now, that comes down to having time on programming. That comes down to how you want to address your parameters in your show. Are you loading it jam-packed with matches? Are you wasting time on video packages? Can you play a 30-second thing like that? These are all things that or questions eventually for Tony Khan, but that is something like, as far as like the documentaries, you can use those things to begin your myth making, your myth building. And I think that's been a weakness thus far in AEW. So, Chris Gannon, AEW should have a visible clock running for every match. It would stop them being inconsistent on time calls and make it less obvious when time limit draws are coming. Eve has been using them for 8 years now, and they work tremendously well. WXW uses them too. I don't understand why more places haven't used them. I think they're that's an interesting thought. Like, as far as like a visible clock running, perhaps they could do where they take the clock and then take it away. There are some commenters that had basically replied, and actually is a point I had as well from my man Sir Sam. So I don't think an actual running clock would be good, because I would suspect it would leave people tuning out for the first 10 minutes of each match. They absolutely should do time calls. That's what they should do. They should do time calls for every match. That would basically ensure you don't know when a time call is coming. If it's been 5-6 months and all of a sudden you're doing time calls, that feels like a dead giveaway. So my man Sir Sam said, while Will Ospreay is the consensus best of his generation as a pure in-ring wrestler, Hangman Page is a better overall wrestler. The reason I say this is that Hangman's in-ring work is only a tad behind Ospreay, but his creativity and ability to communicate and connect with the audience as a character makes him a better all-around package. By the way, I'm not arguing this in the sense of who should be the top star in AEW and who should be getting a push, but more for the meta conversation of who the best wrestler in the world is right now. That is an interesting, thing there. So, like, I feel like, as you mentioned, Will is just capable of doing so many things physically with his body and a spectacular nature. And it really comes down to what you value. If you value somebody that can be vertical, if you value somebody with that speed in that direction, a guy like Ospreay is going to be right up your alley like mine. Hangman is a fighter. He is a striker. He is somebody that is very thoughtful with his stuff. Ospreay is super thoughtful with his stuff. And as far as like ability to connect with the audience, I don't know how Will Ospreay doesn't connect with the audience. Someone's going to have to explain that to me at this point. This feels like a last gasp, kind of like, throwing rocks at a guy, like saying this one thing he doesn't have. Now, I would probably say that just takes time, because I remember when Ospreay wrestled Kenny Omega in the Dome, and the difference between them for me was the people living and dying with them. And that's going to come from Kenny being a decade older than him. And at that point, his fans are way more established, way more dug in, advocating for the cause, per se. I think Hangman has benefited from being on national TV for a lot more years at this point than Ospreay. But Ospreay's work around the world, like, he can do street fights. He can do trios matches. He can do long main events. He can do television matches. He just rolls in and he's there. I say with Hangman, sometimes for me, I love his main events. I don't necessarily know about his short matches though. That would probably be my critique on Hangman, but just slightly. That I'm splitting hairs right there. I think Ospreay is the best guy right now. But it's definitely a worthwhile conversation, and I loved the match that they had against each other, because it had been seemingly this quiet collision course I thought that they were on. I thought, if you think Hangman's the best wrestler in the world, he's definitely got an argument. Personally, I say Will right now, and then we got to see how the everything goes with his his what will be his main event run, presumably in America. But I feel like I've seen enough tape. I feel like, Sam, you've seen enough tape to know exactly who and what this guy is. Now, if you guys have not watched a ton of Will Ospreay, anybody else that's seeing this, like, he's everything. Like, he's everything. Like, so, Up next, my man Seth Rich Rogan. He says a ranking system in AEW won't solve anything that would have been solved by good booking in the first place. Both an official ranking system and generally good booking will inform the audience through wins and losses over substantial opponents, who's next up for world titles, mid-card titles, and so on, but both can be BS'd in the same way. It doesn't matter to the audience if, say, Blake Christian is the 5th ranked guy because he's won 20 dark ROH matches in a row. If he's not getting regular time on mainline AEW TV and isn't getting wins over at least guys in the mid-card, beating him isn't going to legitimize a future contender. That isn't to say rankings are bad. They can be used as a means of adding narrative to otherwise filler matches, but that's no different from guy cut a promo on you earlier in the show, in the previous show, factions are in conflict, etc. I largely agree with that. I think the last video that I made, I addressed how I would use the ranking system, where it would be more like a coach's poll. This is like what this independent body or organization says about the wrestlers that are there, and the booking is largely independent of it. Like, it's all it's an opinion, it's perception. And then like people can do their own storylines, and then they are, they can reference those rankings and be like, I'm mad that you got voted second while I've been, doing all this. Like, you use it in that sense rather than going forward on a, hey, this match directly influences this ranking. Like, I think there needs to be a human element there, and that would strengthen the rankings. Agree with your overall point, though. So up next, my man Yuzuru Hart. Women's wrestling in the United States is graded on a curve. Oh my God, he's doing this. And it holds back the development of the wrestlers involved. It's understandable that we're only about a decade into women's wrestling being taken seriously in the U.S. That's a great point. We're only just getting out of the women's wrestling chants and other self-congratulatory expressions. And now that it's time to get down to quality, it's still an uncomfortable thing people try and talk about. He continues. Let's skip over the Fed. AEW is a work rate promotion. How many women there are not just serviceable, but actively good? I think we all have a good list. Now ask yourself, which of those people you would say are as comparatively good as Kyle Fletcher, Kevin Knight, Ricochet, Darby Allin, Will Ospreay? Even guys tend to be harsh on, like Jack Perry or MJF. Because of this, we have a fan base scared to criticize the work, lest they be grouped in with some of the freaks who watch wrestling or be seen as unsupportive. A promotion scared to push a standard when fans are already counting the minutes and number of segments week to week. And a division that knows, for better or worse, there are plenty of people who are just happy to see them. For every Tony Storm, there are a lot more wrestlers who are just okay. I think this comes down to the fact that women's wrestling fundamentally is different than men's wrestling. And I understand what goes on in Japan and around the world, and there are different standards for different cultures. In America, as you mentioned, women weren't starting their own promotions and training all their people and having all these schools like until recently. Like, there was a huge absence of this for 30, 40 years. And in America, our women are largely playing catch up, and they have to go elsewhere to hone their talents typically. In AEW and any other promotion, there are fundamentally less spots for women available. It is super competitive, and sometimes when these, we see somebody showcase that we feel like should not be out there or anything like that, maybe think about why. I would say they might be in there. Maybe they're there because they're easy to work with. Maybe they have a particular connection with the booker, like there is nepotism there, or anything else. Maybe they are willing to do business while having two people that are awesome in there. You can't make a choice between them. As you mentioned, when you line talent for talent up, there's going to be more opportunities, reps, and just a when you look at wrestling, when you go to a show, you might go to a promotion, right? And they've got 8 matches on the show. and at best, maybe you got 2 women's matches. Just like, so that's 4 spots on a show. Now imagine you're a wrestler. I've got 2 shows each weekend, right? Say I'm a indie wrestler coming up, right? Skip day of the week. We're just going to talk about the weekend. And I'm a women's wrestler. Now, I've got 2 shows, and I have 4 total spots I can be in. And whoever's competing with me in my area, who's an import, they're also fighting for those same 2 spots. If I don't get those spots on those shows, right? Maybe if I'm lucky, I get 1 day, right? But if I'm that guy that's in that area, maybe they can work both, because they can work a tag match. They can be in any of those other 6 matches on there. There's just a spread right there. And I think when we run into women's wrestlers that we feel like are incredible, and they've, say, hey, I have the means to go to Mexico. I have the means to go to Japan. I have forced myself into being a commodity on these independent promotions where they cannot overlook me. I think they should be even more regarded. I think when you talk about fans scared to criticize the work, I think that just comes down to them not being able to be comfortable with what they say about women. I think it comes down to a lot of people trying to correct others for, someone that may make a mistake on saying something. I think there needs to be kind of more grace given from fans to some of the wrestlers, and then amongst each other about it, because when you're watching national television, there is a standard, right? And I'm not saying there shouldn't be, a standard. It's just different for women, and it's different for women in society. And it's not necessarily a wrestling question. This is a societal thing. Just less things are naturally set up for women, and the women that succeed in spite of those limiters should be exalted, and the ones that are struggling to work within them, I think need more understanding. They need more time, and they're going to need more support from men, so who control this business largely. Unless you want to go, work for, whatever promotion in England or, Mexico or Japan, these women's only shows. And, there are different women's promotions in America too, but that's just not the culture here. Up next, James OG. New Japan isn't back and is probably never going to be back. Brother. The faster the New Jahideen realizes this, the more they can enjoy their own product. The only time New Japan has been interesting the past 2 or 3 years is when they bring in AEW wrestlers. Blame the Booker. Blame TK. Blame the Yen. Or blame whoever. New Japan hasn't been good for a very long time. Brother. James OG is setting it off. No Lil Boosie, but brother, I don't know about never, just because eventually something will work. Just bet on the history. I'm not writing New Japan Pro Wrestling off forever. They've got some exciting young wrestlers right now. People are into Yota Tsuji. I think Callum Newman just won the New Japan Cup, and he's got a lot of people I trust very excited about his long-term potential there. And I believe he signed the next 3 years over there. So, lock in on him if you want. But I think it was just a crippling time period, the entire House of Torture, Evil era. And it just was not the thing to follow up the golden era with. And perhaps they set themselves back a little bit. And it's going to be all on these new young guys and Gato eventually either coming around to them. And you can see examples of him coming around to them in the New Japan Cup with that Final Four. It was all young guys. It was like Shota Umino versus Callum Newman, Oleg Bolton versus Yuya Uemura, I believe. And it was just yeah, man, they gotta, just keep going that direction. I think the way a lot of the fans kind of treated Takeshita kind of stunk. I mean, the guy kind of loved being there, and kind of did you a solid. You know, somebody needed to, Yoda Sushi, you need to go over somebody, but it's the entire thing of we are no longer the number one promotion that people don't watch that's not WWE, and feeling like they're kind of underneath the thumb of AEW. So there's a lot of feelings there. So in the last comment here, you guys went crazy today, so I had to give you a little bit more on the length of the video here. Tony Khan really needs to figure out how to have an actual mid-card. Right now, they're just main eventers, basically the guys who are former world champions in AEW or where else. People aiming to become main eventers, chosen few like Darby, Fletcher, Knight, Speedball, and jobbers to the stars. The way a wrestling promotion should be is a bell curve with a few jobbers, mostly mid-card, and a few main eventers. AEW is the total opposite. A ton of jobbers, very few people who are actually just in the middle, and a bunch of main event guys. There's no structure or levels to actually be of linear progression in a hierarchy. Fletcher is the TNT champion, wants to be the world champion. Moxley was the world champion, immediately moves to Continental champion. Hell, Ricochet loses the national title, now he wants to be the world champion. There needs to be more division and delineation between the levels of wrestlers, especially with that many belts. You have 1 million belts, but really the only thing that matters in AEW is, have you been a world champion, yes or no? With everything else just existing as a minor side quest. That's an interesting comment right there. And I think that is a function of AEW's position in the global hierarchy of pro wrestling. AEW isn't necessarily competing with the rest of the world in that sense. They are competing with WWE for talent, and they are competing with, the TKO machine. So in that case, they almost have to have a surplus or an excess of stars. It's almost like how they almost have to pay more money, not being the quote unquote non-glamour franchise. Like you would say, like WWE, like that's, as Cody Rhodes would say, that's the Yankees. So if you are competing for the same person, you might have to pay more to get him if you are the Chicago White Sox or the Chicago Cubs. You might have to pay him more to jump to you, rather than, that's why we always hear people talking about WWE lowballing people, the WrestleMania moments, all that stuff. Like, they can get away with that because they have a certain, prestige, so to say. Now, them having the, the linear progression, the hierarchy stuff, there's politics in every company. There are people that are protective of their spots. There are fixes which come into play, like the title belts tend to be fixes, like to keep people occupied for a certain amount of time. And you're doing a lot of massaging of egos. You're doing, you're looking at the whole thing where you say, have you been a world champion, yes or no? There's only going to be so many world champions. And in order to keep AEW's ethos of kind of where the best wrestle, you kind of almost, what I think Tony Khan does is sign the talent and figure it out later. And in that, there's going to be leakage. Like, there's going to be loss of talent. There's going to be people that feel like you could do more with them. There's going to be people you feel like maybe they did too much with. And in a WWE, they don't have the same pressure to carry the same amount of roster members or anything like that, because at the end of the day, WWE is like, I can just look, at the search results, just if you're on there. There is a level that they are on that, with their interests, and you just apply that across the board with the money, with the TV rights, or anything like that. It's just so much bigger, to where the way you have to compete and compensate is having something like how good your shows are, how good your roster is, and then you figure it out from there. That's what I think the issue is, rather than like you can't just evaluate AEW like, okay, AEW's like this, WWE's like this. It should be a mirror. They have both different circumstances. So anyway, my name is Rich Latta. I appreciate you guys watching this video. And I appreciate you guys that left the comments, gave me a lot of great things to talk about. We will be back next week. Look out for the posts over in the post tab. Subscribe to the channel so you can see it, so you can participate. And eventually, you know, we will make these lives. We will do all that. So anyway, I'm Rich. Peace.
Paul P-Dub in the house. Go and hit that like button on your way out. Leave a few words and I'll holler back soon. Till we meet again, reach the stars and the moon. Woo!